Heated debates, divisive politics, polarizing beliefs. What happens when political discussions enter the workplace and things get heated? Can HR and management get involved? Is this protected free speech? Join us for Panic
at the water cooler.
Today, we're sharing practical tips on protecting your workplace in light of the upcoming election.
A quick legal disclaimer. This podcast is for informational purposes only, is not intended to be legal advice, and does not establish an attorney-client relationship. The topics we discuss are subject to change, and legal advice of any nature should be sought from your legal counsel. Hi, I'm Kelsey Schmidt, partner in the Labor and Employment Practice Group at Haynes Boone.
And I'm Stephen Rotter, managing partner of the Workplace Council. Welcome to Legal Landscape and our employment law podcast, Panic
at the water cooler. So with the upcoming election, employers need to know how to handle politics in the workplace.
Engaging in political activity in the workplace could be a business distraction and take away from productivity and focus, especially during a highly polarized election like this upcoming one. But is political speech in the workplace protected? Doesn't the First Amendment allow employees to say whatever they want?
So actually, the First Amendment doesn't apply to private employers, so they have more latitude to regulate political discussions in the workplace.
And the best way to regulate political discussions is typically to develop and implement a policy. So
Right.
What would go into a politics in the workplace policy?
So there's four main points we want to make that should go in this policy. And first, you want to encourage employees to take an interest in fostering, principles of good government in their communities. And second, you want to note that they can take paid time off to vote. So in most states, including Colorado, employees are entitled to take working time to vote, which should be clear in your politics policy.
Right. So in Colorado, employees are allowed to take up to 2 hours of paid working time if they don't have 3 hours of non-working time when the polls are open before or after their shift. Employers should also make sure that they work with the employee to find out when they're going to take that time off, which they're allowed to do and they can ask about,
right,
so that they can make business decisions and make sure that they have a full workforce or, there's productivity there.
Okay. And then one thing that employers should be mindful is not to discriminate or retaliate against the employees when they're voting. So, for example, if you're a supervisor and you know someone's going to vote for a candidate that you don't support, you can't deny them that right to vote and approve everybody else to vote. And in turn, you can't retaliate them when they come back from voting. So, they went to the polls, they voted for a candidate you didn't like. They come back and you assign them toilet duty, especially if that's not part of their job description.
Toilet cleaning duty after they go vote would be retaliation.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay, so the third thing in your policy that you want to make sure you have in there is a statement that employees' political beliefs have to be their own beliefs. They can't be those of the company.
When employees participate in politics, employers can make sure that employees aren't using their resources and that they're expressing their own views and not the views of the company. So, for example, employees shouldn't be using company email or the logo or printers.
Printer ink is a big one.
Yeah, printer ink they shouldn't use. They also can't grab employers' lists, like employee lists, customer lists, whatever lists they have sitting around, and provide those to a political candidate organization. That would be something in your policy that you can ban.
Okay, makes sense. So we have 3 big points we went over. The fourth point relates to social media. So employers should make clear that employees can't use their social media to represent the company's beliefs or harass each other. So, for example, I can't go on Facebook and post a link supporting a candidate and then tag my employer to make it seem like my employer also supports that candidate. So you make it clear in your policy that employees, if they're going to post on social media, it has to be about their own individual views and they can't bring the company in.
Well, and related to that, employees can't harass each other about political views. So, for example, a lot of people tweet stuff about the candidates and, big political issues. Another employee, a coworker, cannot harass that employee.
Right.
If they can, but if they do, then they're in trouble.
It
violates the policy.
Uh-huh.
Right. And finally, employers should not encourage employees to vote a certain way or to give a political contribution.
Okay, great. So we have a workplace politics policy in place. We have 4 big points we want to put in there. So let's talk about how we might potentially violate the law when we are enforcing those policies. So for example, I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that Title VII any EOC laws don't provide protection for political activity.
Right, because political activity is not a protected class under those laws, like race or gender or age. So if you discriminate against an employee while they're engaging in political activity, that's not going to be protected simply because they're engaged in political activity.
Okay, but you still could subject yourself to a claim even if it's inadvertent.
Yes, like most things that we deal with in this discrimination world of employment law, you have to be consistent. If you let one person discuss politics at
The water cooler.
and you don't let another, then that second person might have a claim depending on the difference between their protected classes.
Okay, so let's provide an example of what that might look like.
Yeah.
So a supervisor over here is a male discussing politics,
At the water cooler.
of course. But what they were discussing aligns with the supervisor's beliefs. So he says nothing. He just lets the discussion continue.
Because he feels like he's on the same side.
Yeah, he's like, great point, under his breath.
Right, that's awesome. Right.
A few days later, that same supervisor, he overhears a female discussing politics and he disagrees with what she's saying. So he tells her to stop talking and get back to work. So now the female potentially has this gender claim because of the way he treated her compared to the male.
Inconsistently.
Yes. Even though that discussion was about politics, it's the way that he treated her compared to the male that could potentially subject an employer to a claim.
Okay, so treat everyone equally.
Exactly. That's just the golden rule of employment law. Okay, so we're good on discrimination, but there's another potential roadblock here.
And what is that?
It's protected activity under the National Labor Relations Act, or the NLRA.
So the NLRA doesn't cover supervisors. So employers can usually or typically direct them not to talk about politics in the workplace, being mindful of what we just talked about with discrimination.
Right.
Employees, on the other hand, are allowed under Section 7 of the NLRA to discuss their terms and conditions of employment. So can employers do anything to stop them from advocating for their candidates or talking about these charged issues?
Yeah, so it's a bit complex. And the NLRA, through recent board decisions, allows a wide range of speech in the workplace that's protected. So, for example, if there's a connection between politics and work, so say a big issue in the campaign is about minimum wage or rest and meal periods, harassment, discrimination, and employees are talking about that as it relates to politics, but it also is related to their own wages, their own terms and conditions of employment. Right. That potentially could be protected under the NLRA.
Yes. Like in this year's election, inflation and the economy are big topic issues. Those could relate then to what you're saying with minimum wage and them employees discussing the terms and conditions of their work.
Exactly. So supervisors should really be mindful before they shut down those types of conversations and discussions if they include employment terms and conditions.
Right. So to sum it up, calm, informative, productive conversations at work about politics are okay, but when those become heated or charged, management or HR should get involved and shut those down.
And do so consistently.
Mm-hmm. That's right, because of the discrimination stuff.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Aside from having a strong workplace politics policy, there are a few other policies that employers at this time should review.
Okay, exactly. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing your anti-harassment policies, making sure that it communicates the employer's expectations for appropriate workplace behavior, and also contains a complaint procedure for employees. If something's happening, we want the employees to be aware of the complaint procedure they can use to help them resolve that issue.
And tying that back to our last podcast, that's really a protection under the Power Act, where if employers have a complaint procedure in their anti-harassment policy, then they're protected.
Exactly. So it's always good to make sure that employees are aware of the complaint procedure, that it's working well, and that employers are taking prompt remedial action with respect to any complaints, including potential complaints about discussing politics in the workplace.
Right.
Employers are also going to want to review their social media policy, make sure it covers situations where employees may be engaged in political activity online.
And another policy would be an anti-bullying policy to ensure that employers can stop political discussions that turn mean or aggressive and cite the policy for defending against that.
Okay. And that brings up a great point about bullying.
Thank you.
So let's throw another hypothetical out there, right?
Love hypotheticals.
Two employees are yelling at each other.
At the water
Of
cooler.
course, that's where everything juicy happens. It's getting heated. This conversation has no end in sight. It's escalating. People are watching.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. Can a supervisor stop those discussions?
Yes, they can shut down the discussions and request the employees focus on their work based on everything that we've talked about. It should be prohibited under an employee's anti-harassment, anti-bullying, and now the new and improved workplace politics policy, which is a mouthful, but
That's what it is.
that's what it is, right? And an employer can point to all these policies then to ensure that they're providing a safe working environment for their employees and to defend against potential claims that may arise.
And another important point is they should always involve HR,
HR.
in these discussions.
Yes.
Our favorite people are HR people. Okay, so that was some great insight about how to handle
Amazing.
politics in the workplace. I think that wraps it up for today, but what are we doing next time?
Your toxic employee.
Your toxic employee. Please reach out to us with any questions.